6 words didn't shake the WNBA because they were clever. They shook it because they exposed a truth the league has spent years pretending wasn't real. Power in modern sports doesn't belong to commissioners, unions, press conferences, or even locker rooms anymore. It belongs to whoever controls attention, who commands it, who multiplies it, and who knows exactly when to unleash it. And in that moment, when the noise was loud and the narratives were sloppy, Caitlin Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She didn't posture. She waited. Because people who actually hold power don't rush to prove it. They let the world catch up. What happened wasn't drama. It wasn't shade. It wasn't a clapback. It was a quiet reminder that the gravitational center of women's basketball had already shifted, and most of the league hadn't fully accepted it yet. The headlines came later. The think pieces followed. The outrage machine spun itself dizzy. But the decision was made long before any of that. The league just didn't know it was living inside a turning point. To understand why 6 words landed like a seismic event, you have to understand what the WNBA looked like before Caitlin Clark entered it, not emotionally, not politically, but structurally. For years, the league operated on controlled expectations. Growth was discussed carefully. Success was measured modestly. Messaging mattered more than momentum. The product was respected, but rarely unavoidable. Games were something you sought out if you already cared. Attention had to be earned slowly, politely, almost apologetically. Nothing moved fast. Nothing broke the ceiling. Then Clark arrived, and the ceiling didn't crack. It disappeared. Suddenly, arenas weren't just fuller, they were loud in a way the league hadn't experienced consistently. Broadcasts weren't background noise, they were appointment viewing. People who had never learned a single WNBA roster were arguing about defensive schemes, officiating, and shot selection on national platforms. Merchandise wasn't symbolic support anymore, it was inventory flying off shelves faster than supply chains could react. This wasn't organic growth. This was acceleration. And acceleration always makes people uncomfortable, especially those who survived the slow years. Because acceleration doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for consensus. It doesn't honor tenure. It doesn't care who's been grinding quietly for a decade. It rewards whoever captures the moment, and Clark didn't just capture it, she defined it. Not with bravado, not with chest-thumping declarations, but with inevitability. She became unavoidable. And once that happens, every interaction around you becomes political, whether you want it to or not. By the time All-Star Weekend arrived in Indianapolis, the league was already balancing on a fault line. Labor negotiations loomed. Revenue conversations were unavoidable. Players were rightfully demanding a bigger share of a pie that had suddenly grown much larger. The message itself was unified, powerful, overdue. But unity is fragile. It only works when everyone understands the stakes and the hierarchy of moments. And that's where things began to unravel. Because there are moments meant for collective pressure, and moments that demand discipline. When those get blurred, movements don't collapse loudly. They collapse subtly. Through side comments. Through unnecessary mentions. Through jokes that aren't really jokes at all. The shirts mattered. The message mattered. The numbers mattered. But the league learned, in real time, that narratives are more powerful than intentions. One offhand remark can hijack weeks of progress. One poorly timed sentence can reroute the conversation entirely. And once the spotlight shifts, it doesn't shift back easily. That's the danger of proximity to power. When you're standing next to it, you forget how visible you are. You forget that every word becomes part of a larger story. You forget that silence from the most powerful figure in the room doesn't mean absence, it means patience. Clark wasn't present physically, but she was everywhere else. In the numbers. In the ratings. In the ticket prices. in the sponsorship valuations, in the conversations investors were having behind closed doors, in the reason the league was even negotiating from a position of leverage in the first place. That's the irony few wanted to say out loud. The protest existed in a different economic reality because she existed. And that reality created tension. Not because anyone was wrong to fight for more, but because growth changes dynamics faster than people emotionally adjust. Veterans who had carried the league through obscurity were now sharing space with a player who arrived into visibility. That doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel earned in the traditional sense. And sports culture has always struggled when merit, longevity, and marketability don't align neatly. But markets don't care about fairness. They care about demand. And Caitlin Clark was demand personified. What made her response so devastating wasn't that it was sharp. It was that it was delayed. It came after the discourse had already peaked. After the defenses were written. After the sides were chosen. After the league had watched the moment slip through its fingers. That's not impulsiveness. That's restraint weaponized. In modern sports, silence is no longer neutral. It's strategic. It forces others to fill the void. It exposes who understands the game beyond the court and who is still reacting emotionally to it. Clark understood that engaging immediately would shrink her. It would reduce her influence to just another opinion in a crowded timeline. So she let others argue on her behalf. She let analysts crunch the numbers. She let others argue on her behalf. She let analysts crunch the numbers. She let fans do the math the league didn't want to advertise. And when she finally spoke, she didn't speak to the argument. She spoke to the infrastructure. 6 words don't trend unless they tap into something already simmering. They don't dominate cycles unless they confirm what people subconsciously suspect. And what people suspected, whether they were comfortable admitting it or not, was that the league's balance of power had changed permanently. That one player could now redirect attention with a sentence shorter than most captions. That brand alignment, not press conferences, was the new leverage. That influence had outgrown tradition. This wasn't arrogance. It was awareness. Clark didn't announce herself as the center of the league. She let the league orbit her actions. That's the difference between loud power and real power. Loud power demands acknowledgement. Real power doesn't need it. It waits until acknowledgement becomes unavoidable. And that's why the moment landed the way it did. Not because it was mean. Not because it was petty. But because it was precise. It exposed a truth the WNBA is still learning how to live with, that the future doesn't ask the past for permission. It arrives, it accelerates, and it dares everyone else to keep up. This was the moment the league realized that managing Caitlin Clark wasn't about protecting her, promoting her, or even defending her. It was about understanding her. And understanding that once a player becomes bigger than the messaging, bigger than the optics, bigger than the old playbook, the rules change. Quietly. Permanently. And this was only the first move.